Chapter 4. A couple days later, I had another and better reason for wanting to get rid of Old Yeller. That was when the two longhorn range bulls met at the house and pulled off their big fight. We heard the bulls while we were eating our dinner of cornbread, roasted venison, and green watercress gathered from below the spring. One bull came from off a high rocky ridge to the south of the cabin, and we could hear his angry rumbling as he moved down through the thickets of catclaw and scrub oak. Then he lifted his voice in a wild, brassy blare that set echoes clamoring in the draws and canyons for miles all around. "That old bull's talking fighting," I told Ma and little Arliss. "He's bragging that he's the biggest and the toughest and the meanest. He's telling all the other bulls that if they got a lick of sense, they'll take cover when he's around." Almost before I got finished talking, we heard the second bull. He was over about the Salt Lick somewhere, and his bellering was just as loud and braggy as the first one. He was telling the first bull his talk was all bluff, and he was saying that he was the bull of the range and that he was the biggest and the meanest and the toughest. We sat and ate and listened to them, and we could tell by their rumbling and bawling that they were gradually working their way down through the brush to meet each other and getting madder by every minute. I always liked to see a fight between bulls or bears or wild boars or almost any other wild animal. And now I got so excited that I jumped up from the table and went to the door and stood listening. I'd made up my mind that if the bulls met and started a fight, I was going to go see it. There were still plenty of careless weeds and crabgrass that needed hoeing out of the corn, but I guessed I could let them go long enough to see a bullfight. Our cabin stood on a high knoll about 100 yards above the spring. Years ago, Pa had cleared out all the brush and trees from around it, leaving a couple live oaks near the house for shade. That was so that he could get a clear shot at any Comanche or Apache that was coming to scalp us. And while I stood there at the door, the first bull entered the clearing, right where Pa had one time shot a Comanche off his horse. He was a leggy, mustard-colored bull with black freckles speckling his jaws and the underside of his belly. He had one great horn that was set for hooking, while the other hung down past his jaw like a tallow candle that was drooping in the heat. He was what the Mexicans called a droop horn. He trotted out a little piece into the clearing, and then stopped to lower his head low. He went to snorting and shaking his horns and pawing at the dry dirt with his 4 feet, and he flung the dirt back over his neck and shoulders in great clouds of dust. I couldn't see the other bull yet, but I could tell by the sound of him that he was close and coming in at a trot. I hollered back to Ma and little Arliss. "They're fixing to fight right here, where we can all see 'em." There was a split-rail fence around our cabin. I ran out and climbed up and took a seat on the top rail. Ma and little Arliss came and climbed up to sit beside me. And then from the other side of the clearing came the second bull. He was the red roan I had seen at the Salt Licks the day I'd shot the doe. He wasn't as tall or long-legged as that droop-horn bull, but every bit as heavy and powerful. And while his horns were shorter, they were both curved right for hooking. Like the first bull, he came blaring out into the clearing, then stopped to snort and sling his wicked horns and paw up clouds of dust as well. And he made it plain that he wanted to fight just as bad as that first bull. About that time, from somewhere behind the cabin, came Old Yeller. He charged through the rails, bristled up, roaring almost as loud as the bulls. All their bellering and snorting and dust pawing sounded like a threat to him. He'd come out to run them away from the house. I hollered at him, "Get back here, you rascal! You're fixing to spoil our show." Well, that stopped him, but he still wasn't satisfied. He kept baying the bulls till I throwed down and picked up a rock. Well, I didn't have to throw it, though. All I had to do was draw back like I was gonna. Well, that sent him flying back into the yard and around the corner of the cabin yelling like I'd murdered him. Well, that also put little Arliss on the fight, and he started screaming at me. He tried to get down where he could pick up a rock as well, but Ma held on to him. "Hush now, baby," she said. "Travis wasn't going to hurt your dog. He just doesn't want him scaring off the bulls." Well, it took some talking, but she finally got little Arliss's mind off hitting me with a rock. I climbed back up on the fence, and I told Ma that I was betting on the Shogo, the droopy horn bull. She said she was betting her money on Roni because he had 2 fighting horns. We sat there and watched the bulls getting ready to fight, and talking and laughing and having ourselves a real good time. We never once thought about being in any danger. When we learned differently, it was nearly too late. Suddenly, the droop-horned bull quit pawing the dirt and flung his tail into the air. "Look out! Here it comes!" I shouted. And sure enough, Shango the droopy-horned bull charged, pounding the hard pan with his feet and roaring his mightiest, and here came Roni to meet him, charging with his head low and his tail high up in the air. I let out an excited yell, and they met head-on with a loud crash of horns and a jar so solid that it seemed like I could feel it all clear up to the fence. Roni went down, and I yelled louder, thinking Shongo was winning. Well, a second later, though, Roni was back on his feet and charging through the dust dirt. Their hooves were churned up, and he hit Shongo broadside. He slammed his short horns up to the hilt into the shoulder of the mustard-colored bull, and he drove against him so hard and fast that Shongo couldn't wheel away. All he could do was barely keep on his feet by giving ground. And here they came, straight for our rail fence. "Land sakes!" Ma cried out suddenly, leaping from the fence, dragging little Arliss down after her. But I was too excited about the fight. I didn't see no danger at the time. I just sat astride that top rail when the struggling bulls crashed through the fence, splintering the posts and rails, and toppled me to the ground almost underneath them. I lunged to my feet, wild with scare, and got knocked flat onto my face in the dirt. Well, I thought for sure that I was a goner. The roaring of the bulls was right in my ears, and the hot, reeking scent of their blood was in my nose, and the bone-crushing weight of their hooves was stomping all around and over me, churning up such a fog of dust that I couldn't see a thing. Then suddenly Ma had me by the hand and was dragging me from out under, yelling in a scared voice, "Run, Travis, run!" Well, she didn't have to keep hollering at me. I was running as fast as I had ever hoped to run, and with her running faster and dragging me along by the hand, we scooted right through the open cabin door, just about a quick breath behind Roni slamming Shongo against the wall. They hit so hard that the whole cabin shook. I saw great big chunks of dried mud chink and fall from betwixt the logs, and there, for a second, I thought Shongo was coming right through the door, right on top of us. But turning broadside like he was too big to shove through such a small opening, and then a second later he got off Roni's horns somehow and wheeled on after him. And there they went, down and alongside the cabin wall, roaring and stomping and slamming their heels against the logs. I looked at Ma and little Arliss. Ma's face was white as a bedsheet, and for once little Arliss was so scared he couldn't even scream, and suddenly I wasn't scared anymore. I just got plain mad. I reached for a braided rawhide whip that hung on a coil on a wooden peg that was driven between the logs. Well, that scared Ma still worse. "Oh, no, Travis, don't go out there," she cried. "They're fixing to tear down the house, Ma," I said. "But they might run over you," Ma argued. The bulls crashed into the cabin again. They grunted and strained and roared, their horns and hooves clattering against the wall. I turned and headed for the door. Looked to me like they'd kill us all if they ever broke through one of those log walls. And Ma came running and grabbed me by the arm. "Call the dog. Put the dog after them." Well, that was a real good idea. I was half aggravated with myself because I hadn't thought of it, and here was a chance for that old yeller dog to pay back for all the trouble he had made around the place. I stuck my head out the door. The bulls had fought away from the house, and now they were busy tearing up more of the yard fence. I ducked out round the corner. I ran through the dog run towards the back of the house, calling, "Here, Yeller! Here! Come here, boy! Go get 'em! Sick 'em!" Old Yeller was back there all right, but he didn't come and he didn't sick 'em. He took one look at me running towards him with that bullwhip in my hand and knew I'd come to kill him. Well, he twitched his tail and let out on a yellin' run for the woods. If there has been any way I could have done it right then, I would have killed that fool dog. But there wasn't any time to be messing with that foolishness. I had to do something about those bulls. They were wrecking the place, and I had to stop it. Pa had left me to look after things while he was gone, and I wasn't about to let two mad bulls tear up everything that we owned and had. I ran up to the bulls and went to work on them with that whip. It was a heavy 16-footer, and I practiced with it quite a lot. I could crack that rawhide popper louder than a gunshot, and I could cut a branch as thick as my little finger off a green mesquite with it. But I couldn't stop those bulls from fighting. They were too mad. They were hurting too much already, and I might as well have been spitting on them. I yelled and I whipped them till I gave clear out. Still, they went right on with their roaring, bloody battle. Well, I guess they would have kept on fighting until they leveled the house to the ground if it hadn't been for a freak accident. We had a heavy two-wheeled Mexican cart that Pa used for hauling wood and hay, and it happened to be standing out front of the house, right where the ground broke away in a sharp slant towards the spring and crick. And it had just come to me that I could get my gun and shoot the bulls when Shongo crowded Roni up against the cart. He ran that long, single clear horn clear under Roni's belly, and then he gave a big heave that he lifted Roni's feet clear off the ground and rolled him in the air. A second later, Roni landed flat on his back inside the bed of that dump cart with all 4 feet sticking up to the air. Well, I thought his weight would break the cart to pieces, but I was wrong. The cart was stronger than I had thought. All the bull's weight did was tilt it so that the wheels started rolling, and away the cart went down the hill, carrying Roni with it. When that happened, Shongo was suddenly the silliest-looking bull you ever did see. He stood with his tail up and his head high, staring after the runaway cart. He couldn't for the life of him figure out what he had done with the roan bull. The rolling cart rattled and banged and craned its way down the slope till it was right beside the spring. Then one wheel struck a big boulder and bounced that side of the cart so high that it turned over and skidded to a stop. The roan bull spilled right into the crick. Water flew in all directions. Roni, he got his feet under him, and he scrambled up out of the hole. But I guess that cart ride and sudden wetting had taken all the fight out of him. Anyhow, he headed for the timber, running with his tail tucked, water streaming out of his hair, leaving a dark wet trail in the dry dust to show just which way he had gone. Shongo saw Roni then. He snorted and went after him. But when he got to the cart, he slid to a sudden stop. The cart, laying on its side now, still had that top wheel spinning around and around and around. And Shongo had never seen anything like that. He stood and stared at the spinning wheel. He just couldn't understand it. He lifted his nose up to give it a sniff, and finally he reached out a long tongue to lick and taste it. Well, that was a big mistake. I guess the iron tire of the spinning wheel was roughed up pretty badly and maybe had some broken chips of broken rock and gravel stuck to it anyway. From the way that Shongo acted, he must have scraped all the hide off his tongue. Shongo bawled and went running backwards. He whirled away so fast that he lost his footing and fell down. He came to his feet and took out in the opposite direction from the roan bull. He ran, slinging his head around and flopping his long old tongue around, bawling like he was stuck in a bear trap. He ran with his tail clamped about as tight as the roan's bull was. It was enough to make you laugh your head off, the way both those bad bulls had gotten the wits scared clear out of 'em, each one thinking that he had lost the fight. But they sure had made a wreck of the yard fence. End of chapter 4.